Hi and welcome to my video. My name is Rosika, this is the Midnight Reader, and this is the I'm too tired for this and it's late at night aesthetic. I thought I'd film a quick little intro to the video you're about to see. Basically, two lovely, now in-person friends of mine that I met on the internet.com, Jay from My Quarter Life Crisis and Kelly from Kelly Seeks Books, we decided to embark in a book club, and this is the first of a set of 3 videos. Each will be released on our individual channels, so this is number 1. It was a lot of fun making these, and I think we're going to try to do another book club in the future. And I want to send a very special shout out to Kelly, who did indeed edit this video for me, because she looked at my life and saw the disaster and was like, I got you. In future, Kelly, I will edit my own, I promise. Thank you. You're a goddess. It's a lot of fun, and I think we're pretty great, and hope you enjoy the video.
Hello!
Hello! Okay, Rosika, this is your video. We're just living.
Oh God. Okay, sorry. Hello, I'm ready. I'm prepared. Hi, my name is Rosika. I am the Midnight Reader. Excuse my notes just laying on my chest. It's fine. And today I'm here to introduce a very special video that is a lovely collaboration with my real life book friends. If you guys want to say hi.
Woohoo! Hi.
Hey, Kelly from Kelly Seeks Books.
Oh, I have
Jay, introduce yourself.
I have You're right. I'm Jay from My Quarter Life Crisis. I spell it weird. But yeah.
These are my real life book friends. We have decided to finally exploit our friendship for clicks. And we have been running a very low-key book club for the last few weeks, slightly over a month, somewhere in that time frame. And we decided to each submit like 2 books to the group to choose from. And then we decided that all the books that we were selecting were so good that we were going to just pick one from every person and have a nice little rotating book club for the foreseeable future in a low stress, low stakes, like low key way. So this week, the reason I'm talking and introducing everything is because this was the book that I submitted and was selected. I originally submitted Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Bunny by Mona Awad. Bunny by Mona Awad is what we are actually chatting about today, is the book we picked. And I would like to point out that I did cast this deciding vote for this when it comes up later, because I believe Kelly voted for Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow. Jay voted for Bunny by, Mona Awad. And I cast the deciding vote because everything I knew about this book was that it had cults, which I figured Kelly would be into, and it had dark, twisty female figures, which I thought Jay would be into.
In retrospect, maybe we should have done the other one.
So I'm going to kind of introduce the book to everybody. So Bunny is technically a horror. It focuses on Samantha, who is going to a small but prestigious New England school of Warren University to get her master's in creative writing. She's stuck in this writing group with this cliquish, rich, mean girl types who all kind of hate her and fawn over each other in this extremely codependent way, and they call each other bunnies, hence the title. But despite hating them, she secretly craves approval and acceptance into their clique. So when the glittering heart emoji invitation to join their quote unquote smut salon writing group comes, Samantha can't resist the urge to join, and dark doings unfold. So I figured we could kind of start with just a little bit of open, spoiler-free conversation about like your thoughts about the book and just kind of like what your overall opinions were, hopefully spoiler-free way, so that people who have not read the book can kind of tune into this part if they have any intention of reading it later. So I will let someone else speak other than me.
I'm not a horror girly. Didn't know anything about this. Apparently it's popular on the TikToks, but your girl is too old for that shit. So without spoiling things for people, I was like kind of getting into it, and then things happened in Act 3 where I'm like, okay, well, like that it made a pivot away from horror, in my opinion, and that just wasn't what I felt like the marketing was leading up to, or like the vibe I had anticipated going in. And it becomes more meta and more like academic magical realism, which just wasn't what I was signing up for. I feel like just, yeah, acts 1 and 2 didn't match up with act 3. So it wasn't a horrible read. It did keep me engaged. I was curious to see what happened. But ultimately, I don't think I would really recommend it to anyone because it was just such a kind of mixed bag for me.
I was listening to my voice memos that I had sent you guys previously about it, and I forgot that I read it twice because I wanted to remember things that happened. But yeah, I think the experience of reading it was entertaining enough, at least the first time around, because I was invested enough in the beginning to learn what dark turns this took. I feel like I was promised like blood and murdery vibes, so I was very invested in figuring out what that was gonna turn into. Um, but then it was just unclear the first time around, like what was happening. I think that like the first two acts were entertaining enough. I think the third act, I wouldn't say went off the rails. I would say got more boring. I think it's a vibe if you like dark academia specifically. Kelly, you said something in our group chat that was like, I think the author was just venting her trauma of being in a graduate writing program, and that feels that's the energy you need. Then this is a good book for that, I think.
I totally agree with that. I think you guys are spot on, and also just a very good book club with very astute astute opinions. I think the third act really kind of fell flat. I think she didn't commit to the bit, and I am not a horror reader either. And the fact that I sent multiple text messages saying that it required more axe murder in in the third act of the book, I think kind of speaks to just how much it just kind of like shied away from the genre I thought it was going to be going for, and it just kind of went back to dark academia and vibes versus really committing to the horror bit, giving us some closure on what was actually happening and happening in the town. I think it could have committed to the bit more than it did, and it should have just gone for full axe murder.
Hot take. I don't think that Samantha should have been the main character. I think it should have been about the bunnies themselves and how their clique fell apart.
I actually really like that as an opinion. Samantha is not the most interesting character in the book by far, and most of her character is about like this crazy desire for acceptance from sometimes more interesting characters. And also, low-key shout out to the Alaska best friend slight love interest because there's never an Alaska like character. And since I am from Alaska, I deeply enjoy seeing an Alaska character on the page.
He deserved better. I was just like, my boy, just get out of this plot. The main character is very passive and in a lot of ways the least interesting. Not only did the reveals in Act 3 rob it of its like horror potential, but I felt like it also robbed her a lot of her agency. And yeah, I think that's part of, I think those two things were the biggest parts of what made Act 3 kind of land really flat and lose the genre momentum it had been building up to that point.
It's kind of like you could just watch Mean Girls, you know.
Does anyone else have any spoiler-free thoughts before we kind of go into the more spoilery sections and conversational topics that I've worked very hard on?
I thought that Samantha and Ava were dating, and I was thrown when I found out they weren't. Was that like a universal experience, or am I the only one?
So for me, I guess without getting into the reveal about her friend, I was really disappointed because she had been written very much as like a manic pixie dream girl. And I was really hoping for some commentary or reversal of that, like something that imbued it with more dimensionality than what ended up happening. And that was I feel like there was a lot of potential. There was a lot of elements that just weren't explored. The same thing with like kind of demonizing traditionally like feminine and like childish, girly things is a common trope from my limited understanding of both horror and in general kind of that coming of age ness. And I was expecting her to do something more with it, especially with the dark academia vibes. This is the perfect time for kind of, that intellectual commentary and like, like kind of dive into something deeper. And it just never did.
There was a part in the third act where it just got a little meta, where it was almost like referencing itself, but in a way where it almost was trying to excuse why the book was bad.
So I definitely, felt the same. I definitely thought that Samantha was in love with Ava, and that Ava was oblivious and thought she had friend zoned Samantha. That was my take on it. She had a very unrequited love kind of thing going on. I agree with them. It got more meta the more it was trying to excuse like plot lines that didn't get fully fleshed out, character choices that were a bit strange. And I definitely also thought that the sort of demonizing of like the saccharine and sweet was an interesting choice because that's the person that's always killed in horror movies. Per my knowledge, is the lusty, busty blonde is always first to die in the lake, and it very much kind of leaned into that trope.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Do we have any positives for the book? Because I feel like we just absolutely ripped into it and we're like, oh, now we're going to get to spoilers. Come back when you read the book. But I feel like we didn't do anything to pitch why someone would want to.
All the booktubers I watch who have loved this book really give it the big not like other girls energy, really give it like dark academia vibes, cult vibes, animal sacrifice vibes. I think if you kind of like the unhinged woman genre, depending on your overall like of horror or dark academia, this might be an interesting pick for you. People who love this book really, really love this book. It just didn't like totally hit for me.
I would say that I enjoyed the first part of it. Like, if you want to read the first part and then come back for spoilers, I think that's fine.
So I guess it's hard to say because I'm not big into either genre this one kind of fell into. There are obviously people out there who enjoy it. I think it's the key is knowing that, having your expectations set right in the beginning. So if you're wanting horror with like kind of a dark academia, meta surreal twist, then this is probably your book. This is probably your vibe. But just knowing that it's not that clear-cut line between the two. So maybe people who are readers of both genres might appreciate the mashup.
That was a really good take. This is why Kelly is professional. All right, are y'all ready to move on to slightly more twisty reveals? Now this is the spoiler section of a little bit of what happens in the book, and then we can kind of like have some little conversations about it. Basically, what happens in Bunny, as far as I can tell, is when she joins the smut salon of the codependent sparkly bunnies, we find out that the bunnies are doing something, they're making drafts, is what they call them. And basically, what that means is they're taking the bunnies on campus, sort of sacrificing them and turning them into men with not very good hands and no genitals and not huge amounts of brains. And they're kind of just adding to this little sycophantic hive mind. And then occasionally they explode. That's also part of it. Their heads blow up sometimes. So Samantha becomes kind of ensconced in this world. She also starts trying to make drafts, appears to be unsuccessful. And then the big twist reveal in the book is that she's sort of pulled into the world of the bunnies because the bunnies have already discovered that Samantha has been making drafts without realizing it. And she has actually created one already, and her name is Ava, her love interest and best friend, who she made from a swan. Because, okay. um, then she also unintentionally creates who I am still upset about because he was really supposed to be a wolf and it was highly implied that he was a wolf. And then it turns out she just made a boy from a deer. And apparently he has amazing genitals because this is highly alluded to in the book. And then instead of, him going and axe murdering the bunnies, it seems like he kind of tortures them a little bit. I don't actually even remember what happens at the end of the book because that's how little of an impact it left on me. If anyone else wants to say what happens at the end of the book after they don't axe murder the bunnies, because I don't genuinely remember.
Oh, they just graduate college. That's simply what happens.
Yes, freaking boring.
I think part of the reason why it doesn't have it's hard to have a solid memory of the ending is because it wasn't a solid ending.
Good.
And that's not meant to be like the biggest diss in the world, but again, it was going so towards meta that it got just so opaque at a certain point because it went into a reasoning that I really hate when it's not developed properly and when it's not foreshadowed in the beginning, which is it was all mental illness the whole time. And what's a figment of her imagination? What's true? What's real? What's not? Can you ever look at swans the same way again? No. And yeah, and so because of that confusion within our protagonists, there's just a confusion and muddled ending that we're left with.
Did you say, can we ever look at swans the same again? Because I just died.
Yes, I did.
I wrote some writing prompts just to give us a little bit of direction because those of you who aren't familiar with us won't know that our Zoom calls last like 3.5 hours and that trying to have a directed conversation is altogether impossible. So we're going to try to stay on task. Question 1, I'm happy that Kelly brought up Ava, and so did Jay, because my first question is about Ava, because I thought that was kind of the most interesting talking point I had about the book, which is I want to talk about Ava. Like, she's a manic pixie dream girl best friend trope, and then she literally turns out to be a creation of Samantha's literal loneliness. And I wanted to know if that was interesting, if that was ironic, if that was a good twist, or if it just kind of did it undermine or help the manic pixie dream girl trope. I just had many questions and I don't know how I feel about it. So I'm gonna ask my smarter friend. Go.
I mean, I think it would have been better if they were dating and then Samantha found out that she had created her own love interest. That was all I wanted. I would also say that if I hadn't re-borrowed this book to reread it in advance of this, I would have absolutely no idea that Ava was a swan. I wouldn't have remembered that Ava had died.
Oh yeah, Ava dies.
Oh yes. Well, this is a spoiler section. So yeah, that's what I have to say about it. I guess like in practice, maybe that means that whatever the author was trying to do wasn't done effectively if I didn't remember Ava that well.
Well, also the thing is, her other creation, which his name I cannot remember, Wolf Boy, but actually Stag Boy, he is also just like a manifestation of everything she wants to be. He's like kind of reckless and he says like things that are hurtful. Like, he gets to be what she wants to be deep down on the inside. And he's the one who starts dating Ava and is hopelessly, in love with her, which is devastating for Samantha. And I'm like, you literally made your dream girl and then you made your better self who's dating your dream girl. Is this good? Is this what we wanted?
That's the thing too that confuses me because Ava's so written as a stereotypical manic pixie dream girl, and if she is a manifestation of Samantha's mind, I would have wanted something more specific that interconnected her. She could have still related or been adjacent to the Manic Pixie Dream Girl genre, but I would have wanted something that was more tangible and specific to Samantha. And maybe we got a little bit of it, but it just read so much as the cliche, and the reveal came so late that Ava was part of her mind that it didn't resonate in the same way. And also wild to me that, like, you're manifesting these people and hottest man alive, can't boink him, and the friend you kind of want to fuck but like just ditches you for days and weeks on end. And I'm like, I think there's just easier ways to hate yourself. Like, isn't the whole point of like wanting to not be lonely is to have these people around, and like they're consistently never around when you need them? I think that's something she needs to discuss with a counselor, but I'm not educated enough to help with that, but it just seemed weird and unsatisfying as a reader.
Yeah, and I think like part of what makes Ava not satisfying is the fact that like she has. Well, actually, let me start over. Like, part of what makes it unclear that Ava is a manifestation of Samantha's imagination is because I don't know what Samantha wants. She's just generic. She's just a generic movie trope from the 2000s. And I could have fleshed out Samantha's character. She was like, God, I always wanted to ride a motorcycle. And then, like, her best friend rides a motorcycle or things like that. Yeah, exactly.
100%. I 5,000,000% agree to that. Like, there's a vagueness to Ava, but that's because there's a vagueness to Samantha. And I get that that's part of her journey, is that she doesn't belong and she's like, meh, meh. But it's too long for this to be a novel for having a protagonist that's like, I don't know anything about me or anyone else. And it's just like, make this a short story, make it about the bunnies.
To add into this, because we're already talking about Ava, I did finally figure out Dear Wolf Boy's name. It's Max, because I wrote it down. I had zero chance of remembering that. So I also want to talk about Max, because Max is definitely Samantha's wish fulfillment. Like, he dates Ava, he seeks revenge on the bunnies, also because the bunnies kill Ava. Sorry, spoilers. But most importantly, I want to talk about interspecies relations. Like, did a swan and a deer actually bone? And how many of the bunnies actually sexed with a deer? Like, I would like your thoughts.
Maybe Jay can speak to this since she reread. Are there parts of her Ava's humanness that correlates to her swanness? Because like we get that hit over the head with what Samantha at least thinks Max is going to be, and there's like hints and things of like he's something. But I don't remember anything about that with Ava. Very interesting. But they have like people parts at the time, so that's what's wild. And Max has more human consciousness than clearly the bunny giraffes do. So, uh, middle ground, ethical, unethical. I don't know.
Yeah,
Should we call PETA?
I don't think we have to at this point. And you know what? Those bunnies can work through that in their own time, because I know they're not going to tell therapists about this. So this is a them problem, but I don't think it's like a society problem. And no, I don't recall there being any like hints of Ava's gooseness, swanness.
Like, she didn't honk enough in public for you? The only thing I can kind of remember is that a couple of times it's alluded that she's pretty graceful. Like, they talk about them dancing a lot. And I guess you could go like Swan Lake or like Two Swans on a Lake, but their big thing is they dance together all the time. And she's supposed to be like much more graceful and like light-footed than Samantha. That's the only thing I can think of, other than they mention her ripped tights like 50,000 times.
That's a fair point and a fair mention, but that then annoys me that the author did that, because on land they're not graceful and they can't dance. So that should have gone back to the editor on that. The other thing too is, well, like I think it's more clear cut unethical with the bunnies, because it's like there's no consent, there's no cognitive awareness or like agency, and there's explosions. So, you know, I think on every level, that's no bueno. Again, with Max and Ava, they showcase their own agency. Also, like, Ava went to Paris that one time. So, like, she was totally fucking a guy in Paris. And, like, I'm like, that's wild. So there's not even, like a restraint of distance between her, like, mental illness, hallucinations, manifestations, and um all of that. So, but then like she goes back and her like Ava's space is like she was like squatting there. So I don't know, like again, we're just like in murky waters of like how much actually happened versus how much she imagined. And then like they just are able to like have schizophrenic shared delusions with the other unwell girls in this scenario. I don't know. It's like synchronized mental illness.
Oh, I definitely have thoughts on this. So for you, you thought most of this was hallucinatory because for me, I thought all of this was happening. I was all in, and I really wanted to know how a swan got a social security number and a passport because I was like, how did the swan get to Paris? Did she fly?
That's the thing. Like act 1 and 2 really leads you out to that horror element, and part of the horror element is this physical horror, this like physical manifestation of these real life tangible things. But then act 3 kind of takes that all back, and it's like, just kidding, she's unwell, everything she thought she saw was like not the way she envisioned it. It was like an extreme version of like rose colored glasses, where she was just so obsessed with this vision that some things were true, some things weren't. Because like there were some items in the space that was Ava's place, but then like from what I remember, like it was like the shabby, rundown, abandoned building instead of like an apartment, and different things like that that just lend itself to being like, okay, so like, what did I read this for then? Like, we just went on a trip with this lady and nothing's resolved. I don't know what I'm rooting for or what the point of this was. And she's like, lol, I don't know, but I'll graduate though. And that annoys me too, where I'm like, you did jack diddly. Don't act like you're graduating.
Like, she didn't even finish a freaking writing assignment. She didn't finish her thesis.
This was another talking point I had, which is how much, like what percentage of the writing critiques that Samantha receives in her class do you think that Mona Awad received in real life? Because one of the through line opinions we all had was that this was someone, an author, who was working through the trauma of going to grad school. And the one that kept popping up for me is they kept talking about how needlessly dark Samantha's writing was, and Mona Awad's writing is very much like that. She'll have a throwaway sentence that's talking about like eyeballs, and I'm like, oh, okay, sure.
I feel like it was a weird mix of both like probably copy paste what she got, like you're saying, where it's just like overly dark, especially when it was hitting home about the writer itself, as far as like, oh, you just really want belonging, or like, you know, anytime they like made a comment uh, referring to the writing of like, you just don't open up, and I wanted to get more from the character. It's like, I feel like that was probably very on par with what she got and what we got. You know, I don't disagree. The other half, I think it's almost like exaggerated satire almost, because, you know, like I think she's overly representing this liberal, abstract, postmodern program. And so you get these like over the top ridiculous statements, especially from the bunnies, but also about like the experimentation in the craft, and like the writing the prompts on like glass and different things like that. There's an element of there that I think was going maybe for humor, but didn't land, because I think she was just still so sour about it. and it didn't match the story vibes. Like, I think it should have been a short story of like dark academia satire of like how ridiculous like modern creative writing programs can be, and then a short story on the bunnies. But then like she's like, I'm gonna say all the things at the same time, and it's gonna be like my magnum opus of like fuck you Brown or wherever she went to school, which is like also like feeds into the elements of like the pretentiousness that she bleeds into a lot of the characters and the faculty and stuff and all of that. So it's just like, okay, we get it, you're salty. Like, just, I don't know. Like, on one hand, I would say this is great for someone who's also recovering from postgraduate bitterness. But then, like, I think it just puts you back in that same of mind. And so I don't think it's cathartic. It would just be like simmering in the stew of crankiness.
I don't remember any of the critiques that Samantha got. Like, I skipped over any chapter that was Samantha centric. So I apologize for that. But I did enjoy listening to some of the critiques that the bunnies got, like that one girl who like is just obsessed with like a fairy tale retelling. I was like, that's mean. But I was like, I guess there are a lot of fairy tale retellings in this world. How many times can we retell a fairy tale? But I don't know if that's something that Mona Awad has gotten herself.
Another question I had for the group. So does this story work if you do a gender swap of all the characters? Like, would this work if it was a group of men creating a group of like women as essentially like toys or drafts? Because I don't think it does. I think this book gets canceled.
Okay, so first off, it doesn't work because it's not scary to just have, or like not scary in a fantastical way of just like frat bros being like, I'm going to make these blow up sex dolls into real people. But also I feel like it'd be the other way around. Like their drafts would be like, how can I take this real person I find hot and like suck out all the parts that annoy me? Like her telling me I need to do my dishes or something.
Very Stepford Wives.
Yeah, so it's like it's just a completely different book and it doesn't hit on the same beats. The other thing too is that like there's not this cultural fascination and disgust with masculine boyish traits as there is with girlish traits. So it would have to be completely revamped. I also yeah, I don't know. I haven't read a lot of dark academia in general, much less with boys or guys as the forefront. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting. Wait, so then if it's all gender bent, so then Max would be a chick and Ava would be a dude. Um,
Manic Pixie Dream Boy.
yeah. So like the manic wouldn't work, but I don't know if it would maybe fit better because it's not slotted so heavily into stereotype that it could kind of exist as its own thing. I like the homoerotic vibes of that. And then having them have a representation of their best girl self fuck the guy they want to be with. So I don't know. It could be interesting, but it'd be a radically different story.
Yeah, I don't think it would work at all because I just think that like a group of frat boys would just like buy a sex doll, you know?
Well, no, I mean, they wouldn't buy a sex doll. They would just rape someone at a party, but you know.
That's fair.
Dark.
Like this book was trying to be.
Oh.
I mean, like, well, let's the Stanford swimmer, you know? Like, that's just a Tuesday. That's just called real life.
I like how the group of three women were like, oh yeah, if it's just a group of college boys being evil, that's not scary enough because that's too realistic.
See.
Yeah, where's the cannibalism?
There was no cannibalism in this either. Like I know, this is why I think I couldn't get Jay on board, was like no one ate each other.
In either capacity.
True.
It's a shame. It's a scandal.
All right. One of my favorite things about this book was the hive mind aspect of the bunnies. That was probably the thing I thought was the most kind of scary and the most intriguing horror aspect of the book. And it was like profoundly underdeveloped. It just kind of sort of faded away and wasn't explained at all. but the bunnies all kind of have the same group think. They all kind of speak with the same voice. Their creations all kind of speak with the same voice. And that was honestly probably the horror aspect I was the most interested in. I didn't know if you guys had other aspects you really enjoyed about the book. That was one I was actually disappointed didn't stick the landing because I was like, this could have been so cool.
For me, and no surprise for people who know me, I was interested in the magic element. So I was really curious by the phenomenon of like how they figured out they could create these drafts, why bunnies, why only bunnies for them, and like yeah, like all of the different stages and elements and whatever. I thought that was super fascinating. Love the fact that it's like this amount of effort to try to like create a man with genitals versus just like go to a bar and talk to someone.
I feel like that's such an accurate representation of like our current dating lives as a society. Talk to a real person. Why? I have other thoughts. I agree. I really liked the aspect of Samantha kind of being sucked into the cultish behavior. Like she's wearing these like weird cupcake clothes. Like she's suddenly not interested in anything to eat unless it has like a butt ton of sugar in it. Um, yeah, I would have loved more of that, but only if it like kind of tied back into her artwork in some way, like where maybe the writing professor was like, yeah, like your work was really good, or like as she becomes more integrated into Hive Mind, the professor goes like, hey, what happened to your dark stuff? I do kind of miss it. You're at least like an individual or something like that. Like hit me over the head with it because otherwise, the alternative was I got lost in the narrative.
Hit me over the head like you did with those bunny drafts. I just had a thought that answered a question I had when I was reading it that just occurred to me. Because, like, for me, a lot of the way through it, I'm just like, okay, so they don't have dicks, but like, oral exists. But then I realized, oh, they like to nibble at random times. So that's a no. That's not great down there.
They chew on
And
furniture.
yeah, well, furniture, but also one of them chews on their glove at one point, and like they have to like feed them carrots and stuff, and it's like, oh, that's I can see why they don't trust them down there. And then I'm like, oh, and their hands are janked up. So like in every way, like in every capacity you want it, it's like it's just no bueno. So the other thing too that landed flat that I'm like, okay, what was even the point of this? Was like that faculty dude that like she almost had a thing with but didn't. And I'm like, this is like it felt like, especially as a person who tries to write and reads a lot of people who are aspiring writers, someone who's like flinching away from conflict, where it's like there could have been a thing here. There could have been like you were developing intention towards something and then you're like, JK, nothing happened. Something almost happened and it got weird. And then we're just going to back away from this and it's just going to fizzle out.
So for context, what she's talking about is there's a professor called the Lion, who that's her like pet name for him. It's all very so many animal names, whatever. So we're alluded to that something happened with him last year. All the bunnies kind of think that they had a relationship and it went wrong. And all we know kind of from Samantha is that she's super doesn't want to be around him, like flinches around him whenever he's there. And we're just kind of built up and up to this point where basically it's like she spilled her guts. Like she was talking about how depressed she was, and it made him uncomfortable, and he didn't talk to her anymore, and he didn't want to be friends with her. Like he didn't want to have like a platonic friendship with her anymore. And that was it. That was the whole reveal.
I forgot about how it ended. I just, again, I skipped all the Samantha chapters in this reread. But hearing you explain it like that, I actually kind of like that because it feels like a metaphor for like how you want a manic pixie dream girl, but you don't want like the depression and the loneliness that she experiences. You just want to have sex with her and then like go back to reading your book or something like that. And that could have been like a cool like tie-in or something that like no one want. I don't know. If that was like the message that the book was going for, that could have been a great message of like, or critique of like, do people want real depth? But that's not what the book was saying overall, I feel like.
And my last talking point of all the preordained things I managed to scribble on my lunch break. um, so I had just a regular book club talking point, which is, I don't know if Jay's going to be able to contribute because she said she skipped everything about Samantha. What do you think is Samantha's like biggest driving force of her character? Is it superiority? Is it rage? Is it loneliness? Is it disappointment? Because I have a real pitch for it being superiority. And I was just trying to think about what could make her character more interesting in retrospect. So I want to see what you guys have to say, and then I'm going to throw my hat in for superiority.
It's one of those things where it's like twofold, which is that I think a lot of it is driven not by Samantha. I think it's driven by her being just like sucked into the flow and expectations of her environment and current like culture and expectations. Like, I don't feel like she's in grad school because she wants to. I feel like she's in grad school because she's in grad school. And like, once you're in grad school, like, you need to graduate grad school, and that's the only reason why she's still in grad school. And that's why, like, even though Ava poses, you know, just getting away, running away, whatever, she's like, but I'm in the grad school. Just different things like that, where it's like she got sucked into the bunnies, and then she's like, oh, I'm with the bunnies now. And then Ava comes along and takes her out, and she's like, oh, just kidding, I'm not with the bunnies now. Now, I think her internal perspective of the world and what dictates her thought and lens on herself and everything. I agree with you, and my only additional detail is I think it's superiority driven by immense insecurity. Like, it's not from inflated self-esteem, it's from a lack of self-esteem. And so you get those like oscillating parts to her perspective of the world of like extreme judgment and extreme categorization of people and things, but then will be like dumped into, what's even the point of me? No one likes me. It's meant to be this way. There's something broken about me. I've always been broken. Things like that. So it kind of two ends of the same coin.
I like that superiority fueled by insecurity. Yeah, I feel like that really sums her up. Yeah, I was gonna say superiority too, because I feel like if she did truly feel superior, she wouldn't have joined the bunnies. But at the same time, even when she was there with them in the early days, she was almost trying to hold on to like this part of her was like, no, I hate them. I hate their stupid girly things, but you're here, you know? So it's kind of like, just shh. If you want to be with the bunnies, just accept that you want to be with the bunnies. If you don't want to be with the bunnies, just don't be with them. I think she, like, Ava being like her dream self really speaks to that, because she has this line like, Ava wouldn't has no idea why I would want to hang out with them. Like, if she doesn't like someone, she simply won't hang out with them. And I think that's what Samantha wants to be, but in her heart, she's not, I guess, strong enough, or she doesn't have like a secure sense of self enough to do that.
Yeah, I really like the insecurity, like lack of self aspect of it, because the whole time I was reading it, I'm like, okay, so she joins the bunnies not only out of sense of like needing to belong because she wants to be liked, she wants to be accepted, but also because she wants to be accepted and then quietly know that she's better than everyone else in the group. And then you kind of get the ultimate little wish fulfillment of that, where she's accepted into the bunnies and they keep making these like terrible, you know, no hands, no genitals boy toys that explode sometimes. And she's made this whole ass manic pixie dream girl out of a swan. She's making boys with working parts out of stags. Like, she, like, deep down just knows that she's a little bit better than everyone else, that she's so just like needs and craves acceptance by, but she needs that acceptance while knowing that she's a little bit better than everybody else.
Totally. And to your, I think what you were saying towards the end of that question was also like how the story could have been better. And for me, and I think what we've kind of danced around is the idea that Samantha's like the least interesting thing. It's the circumstances, it's the things that she encounters, which is fine. There are plenty of stories that do that and do that well, where the protagonist is at the drawing point. But I think if it had been a tighter narrative around like, this is what happens when a woman or a person is lost and doesn't have a sense of self and has like an unmanageable need to belong, how they can get swept up in unhealthy and dysfunctional relationships. I think that would have been a much stronger piece. And if you had stripped away like the lion and a lot of the other nonsense around her and just made it a tighter piece, because that was the other thing that annoyed me, because it's like it really slowed down towards the end of Act 2 leading into Act 3, because it had such a long segment of like the all is lost, Dark Night of the Soul thing. And because Samantha wasn't the drawing point, I'm like, okay, girl, get over it. Like, come on. Like, just I knew this was just a part of like a lot of plot formulas, and I was just I wasn't invested. I wasn't there with her experience it. And I'm just like, okay, let's go. This could have been 3 pages. How long are you going to be running around trying to find people? And at that point too, and that was the other thing too, is at the beginning of the novel, she had a much stronger voice. And then as it went away, got more diluted, which makes sense because she essentially entered a cult. And so she adopted cult voice and then she lost herself. But it just added for a real drag in that part of the narrative, because it's just like, she just became like a soppy wet character. And I'm like, what am I here for? All the cool, interesting horror elements are gone. Even a lot of her interactions with Cullen, my boy, who I forgot his name, but Alaska boy, who deserves so much better than like literally everyone here. Like, he deserves better faculty, better friends, better love interest. Just becomes like her like fucking Uber driver, because like she has put nothing in this relationship. And I'm like, why, buddy? I gotta like, the people in this town suck, but like you can do better. Like, just, I don't know, get on a video game, like make friends online or something, because she is not it. But anyway, so that's my 2 cents.
So I think people mostly know this, but can you all tell the class, from a 1 to 5, where would you put this book on the star rating scale?
On my official Goodreads, I put it as a 3. It was pretty middle of the road. If I was a fan of this genre, if it was something that I had picked up outside of this book club, I probably would have put it as a 2, because it didn't really hit what I needed to hit for either of the genres. I feel like it was juggling. But because I went in not really knowing anything, and I'm, it's not, both of these genres aren't really my cup of tea. It didn't feel fair to give it a lower rating, because ultimately the people who should be picking this up are people who vibe with that genre and are down for it. It was just kind of middle of the road for me. I thought Act 1 and 2 were interesting. I don't know if I would have made it to Act 3 if this wasn't a book club, though.
No, I agree. It was a solid 3. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. But I'll never read it again.
Except for the second time for homework.
You literally read it twice.
Okay, I will say the second time reading it, I disliked it so much more. I had to like re-listen to my voice memo notes to remember, like, no, you were fine with it. Like, you don't like it because you know what happens and it sucks. But like when it was a mystery, 3 out of 5, you know?
When it was a mystery and heads were exploding, you were more into it. So I also, if I had not read this with a book club and I hit Act 3 by myself, I probably would have DNF'd this book, because it's so outside of like the genres that I enjoy. And if I had not read it with you guys, I probably would have rated it 2 stars. But I think I'm actually going to rate it 3, because it wasn't like I hated it. And I think the main reason that we're all so pissy about it is because the first 2/3 of the book was genuinely pretty enjoyable. Like, it was really building somewhere, it had interesting plot points, and I'm just disappointed. I'm not upset, I'm disappointed.
There's nothing like an ending not landing that really makes people salty. And then Jay kind of commented on something that we can't, which is the rereadability. And I think that's always hard with things where it leans so heavily on plot twists and mystery. Because once you know it, there is a lot of air taken out of the story.
So I think we're gonna wrap it up. This was our hot takes on Bunny by Mona Awad. The Book and Friends collab is going to continue. There will be at least 2 more books in this particular, reading adventure. So feel free to comment below on what you would like us to read next. We've already mostly read, half read. It's debatable. We've mostly read the next 2 books that we've put together, but if there's anything you'd like us to read in the future, we may continue the Book and Friends book club because we do this anyway. And we, again, might as well exploit our friendship for clicks.
Yes.
Yep. Yes, indeedy. Also, subscribe to all of us because we'll be alternating where the video goes out from.
See you next time. Bye.